Your soulmate confessed their love for you in public. And you will not believe what they said. My beloved child. Your soulmate finally said the words they had been hiding, and they did it in front of people who never expected your name to leave their lips. But the shocking part wasn't simply that they confessed their love for you. It was what they said immediately afterward. For weeks, maybe longer, they had been carefully avoiding certain questions. Whenever someone mentioned relationships, commitment, or the person they truly wanted beside them, they would become strangely quiet. People noticed. Someone finally pushed them for an answer, expecting another excuse. Instead, your soulmate stopped pretending. Their expression changed. Their voice became serious. And then they said something about you that made the entire conversation go silent. Not because it was embarrassing. Not because it was dramatic. But because everyone suddenly realized that their feelings for you were far deeper than they had been allowed to see. And there was one person standing nearby who seemed especially disturbed by the confession. That person had apparently believed your soulmate would eventually move on from you. They had watched the distance, the silence, and the uncertainty and assumed those things meant the connection was disappearing. But your soulmate revealed the opposite. They admitted that trying to push their feelings away had only made those feelings clearer. Then came the first confession. They said they could meet 100 different people and still recognize that something was missing, because none of those people would be you. Imagine the silence after hearing that. Someone tried to laugh it off and asked whether they were seriously willing to admit this publicly. Your soulmate didn't back down. They looked directly at the people around them and made it clear that they were tired of acting as though you were simply someone from their past. You were still present in their thoughts, their choices, and the future they secretly imagined. But don't skip, because this is where the confession became much more personal, and someone asked the question your soulmate had been avoiding for a very long time. They were asked, if you feel this strongly, why haven't you told them? And for a moment, your soulmate had no answer. That silence revealed more than any speech could have. Eventually, they admitted there was fear behind the distance. Fear that too much time had passed. Fear that you might no longer believe them. Fear that after everything left unsaid, showing up with the truth would only make you question why they waited so long. But then your soulmate said something nobody in that room was prepared for. They said they would rather risk hearing the truth from you than spend the rest of their life wondering what could have happened if they had finally been brave enough to speak. Someone immediately asked what they planned to do next. Your soulmate didn't give them the answer they expected. Instead, they revealed that they had already made a decision concerning you, and according to what they said next, this public confession wasn't the end of their courage. It was only the beginning, because the next thing they intend to say is meant for you alone. What happened after that silence changed the entire mood in the room. Your soulmate admitted they had already imagined the exact moment they would finally speak to you, but there was something they needed to settle first. Someone nearby asked whether this was simply emotion talking, whether tomorrow they might become afraid again and retreat into silence. Your soulmate answered immediately. They said this wasn't a sudden feeling. They had carried it through ordinary mornings, sleepless nights, distractions, conversations with other people, and every attempt to convince themselves that distance would make everything easier. It never did. Instead, one truth kept returning: whenever they pictured a future that genuinely felt right, somehow you were still there. Then they made another confession. There had been several moments when they almost reached out to you, only to stop at the last second. But the reason they stopped wasn't what everyone assumed. They weren't afraid of loving you. They were afraid of arriving in your life with words they couldn't prove through their actions. That distinction stunned the people listening. Your soulmate explained that saying, "I love you," publicly was easy compared with standing in front of you and accepting whatever answer you might give. They knew you might have questions. You might remember every confusing silence. You might wonder why someone who cared this deeply allowed so much uncertainty to exist between you. And your soulmate apparently understood that completely. They said they weren't expecting you to erase the past simply because they had finally found courage. They wanted the opportunity to explain it. Then someone asked the question that made your soulmate hesitate: what if they don't want to hear you anymore? For several seconds, nobody spoke. Your soulmate looked down, gathered themselves, and gave an answer that revealed just how serious this had become. Stay till the end, because those words led directly to a decision nobody saw coming. Your soulmate said, "Then I'll respect their choice, but I won't let fear make the choice for me anymore." That sentence changed everything. Until that moment, people had been listening to a confession. Now they realized they were witnessing a decision. Your soulmate wasn't asking friends for permission. They weren't testing whether people approved of you. They were announcing that the hiding was finished. And then came the detail that made one person in that room immediately look toward them in disbelief. Your soulmate revealed that they had kept something connected to you, a reminder they couldn't bring themselves to throw away, even during the period when they tried hardest to move forward. Someone recognized exactly what they were talking about and asked why they had kept it all this time. Your soulmate smiled, but there was emotion behind that smile. Then they quietly explained that whenever they considered letting it go, the same thought stopped them. And when the people around them finally heard what that thought was, they realized your soulmate had been protecting one secret about you that nobody had known until now. The secret was hidden inside something everyone else would have considered ordinary. Your soulmate admitted that the reminder they kept wasn't valuable because of money or appearance, it mattered because of the moment attached to it. Whenever they saw it, they remembered a version of you that perhaps you never realized they had noticed. A small expression. A few sincere words. A moment when you weren't trying to impress anyone, yet somehow became unforgettable to them. And then your soulmate revealed the thought that had stopped them from throwing that reminder away: what if one day I get the chance to tell them what this meant to me? Suddenly, the people listening understood something important. Your soulmate hadn't simply been holding on to the past. Somewhere inside them, they had been leaving a door open for you. But one person still wasn't convinced, and what they asked next forced an even deeper truth into the open. They looked at your soulmate and said, "Are you in love with who they really are, or just the memory you've created?" That question could have ended the conversation. Instead, your soulmate became unusually calm. They admitted that you weren't perfect, and neither were they. They remembered misunderstandings, distance, moments when both of you could have handled things differently. But that was exactly why their feelings frightened them. They weren't loving an imaginary version of you. They had seen your uncertainty, your guarded side, your strength, and the parts of you that didn't always know what to say. And still, when life became quiet, you remained the person their heart returned to. Then your soulmate said something that caught everyone off guard: "I don't want the old story back. I want the chance to create something better with them." That sentence silenced the last person who had been questioning them. Yet another question immediately surfaced. What exactly were they planning to do about it? This time, your soulmate didn't hesitate. They revealed that they had already decided the next conversation couldn't happen through rumors, friends, or carefully hidden hints. It had to happen directly with you. They wanted you to hear the truth without an audience and without anyone interpreting their words for them. But there was one more thing they planned to confess, something even the people standing there hadn't known. Your soulmate admitted that the public declaration wasn't spontaneous. Earlier that day, something had happened that made them realize they could lose their opportunity completely if they waited much longer. Someone asked what had happened, and your soulmate's expression immediately changed. The confidence disappeared for just a second, replaced by something heavier. Then they revealed that they had heard something about you. Something that made them believe another person might soon become important in your life. And that was the moment your soulmate realized silence was no longer protecting their heart. It was putting their entire chance with you at risk. The possibility of someone else entering your life hit your soulmate harder than they expected. Until that moment, they had convinced themselves there would always be more time. Another week. Another opportunity. Another perfect moment when courage would somehow arrive without fear attached to it. But hearing that you might be opening your heart to someone new shattered that illusion. Your soulmate admitted that their first reaction wasn't anger or jealousy. It was regret. They suddenly imagined you laughing with someone else, trusting someone else, eventually building the future they had secretly pictured with you. And for the first time, they understood what their silence could actually cost them. Someone asked whether they were confessing only because they were afraid of losing you. Your soulmate shook their head and said, "No. I'm confessing because losing them made me realize how long I've been lying about what I truly want." But that answer led to an even harder question. Someone in the room leaned closer and asked, "Then what exactly do you want from them?" Your soulmate went quiet again, but this time they weren't searching for an excuse. They were choosing their words carefully. They said they didn't want to rush into your life and demand an answer. They didn't want you to feel pressured by their confession or responsible for fixing the time that had been lost. What they wanted was one honest conversation. One chance to sit across from you without pretending. They wanted to explain why they disappeared behind silence when their feelings were actually becoming stronger. They wanted to hear what you felt too, even if your truth was difficult for them to accept. Then came the line nobody expected: "If they give me one real chance, I won't waste it hiding anymore." That was when someone who had remained completely silent throughout the conversation finally spoke, and apparently, this person knew something about you that your soulmate didn't. They told your soulmate not to assume your heart had already moved on. Those words immediately changed their expression. Your soulmate asked what they meant, but the person refused to explain everything in front of everyone. They only said there had been signs that you weren't as emotionally distant as your soulmate believed. Suddenly, the public confession took another turn. Your soulmate wanted details. Had you mentioned them? Had you asked about them? Had you ever wondered why they disappeared? The person smiled slightly and said, "You need to hear that from them, not from me." Don't skip, because what happened next was the first real movement toward you. Your soulmate reached for their phone, stared at your name, and admitted their hands were shaking. Everyone expected them to send a long emotional message. They didn't. Instead, they typed something surprisingly simple, read it twice, and hovered over the send button. But just before touching it, someone noticed the exact words on the screen, and asked your soulmate to stop. The warning came so suddenly that your soulmate pulled their hand away from the screen. The message they had written was simple: "Can we talk? There's something I should have told you a long time ago." Nothing dramatic. Nothing that revealed too much. But the person beside them believed those words carried the wrong feeling. They said it sounded like bad news, the kind of message that could make you anxious before you even knew what was happening. Your soulmate stared at the screen and realized they were right. After all this silence, they couldn't return to you with another mystery. So they erased every word. Someone suggested writing the entire confession instead, but your soulmate refused. "No," they said quietly. "They deserve to hear this from me." And that was when everyone realized your soulmate wasn't preparing another message. They were preparing for a real conversation. Then something unexpected happened. The person who seemed to know more about your feelings finally pulled your soulmate aside. Away from everyone else, they revealed one small detail they had been protecting. Apparently, your name had come up before, and when it did, you hadn't reacted like someone who felt nothing. You had asked a question about your soulmate. A careful question. The kind people ask when they don't want anyone realizing how much the answer matters. Your soulmate immediately wanted to know exactly what you had said, but the person wouldn't repeat it. "If I tell you everything," they explained, "you'll walk into that conversation thinking you already know their heart." That stopped your soulmate cold. Because they suddenly understood this couldn't be about winning you back or proving that their public confession was powerful enough. It had to be about finally giving you the truth and allowing you to choose what happened next. Your soulmate looked at their phone again, but this time they didn't type anything. They put it away and made a decision that surprised everyone still watching. They said when they approached you, the first words wouldn't be, "I love you." Those words mattered, but something else needed to come first. Something they believed you had deserved to hear long before this public confession ever happened. One person asked what could possibly be more important than admitting their love. Your soulmate's eyes became serious, and they answered, "I need to tell them why I stayed silent when I wanted them the most." Suddenly, the entire mystery shifted. Because until now, everyone assumed fear was the only reason they had held back. But your soulmate admitted there had been another reason, one involving a choice they made behind the scenes because they believed it would protect you. And when they finally explained what that choice was, even the person who thought they knew the whole story realized they had been wrong. That hidden choice had been weighing on your soulmate far longer than anyone realized. They admitted there was a moment when they could have stepped closer to you, spoken honestly, and changed everything, but they deliberately backed away. Not because their feelings had disappeared. Not because someone else had replaced you. They believed your life was already carrying enough uncertainty, and they feared bringing their own complicated emotions into it would make things harder for you. So they convinced themselves that staying silent was an act of care. But with time, they began questioning that decision. Had they actually protected you, or had they simply decided what was best for you without giving you a voice? That realization haunted them. And during the public confession, they finally admitted, "I thought distance would make their life easier. I never stopped to ask whether my absence might hurt them too." Those words changed the way everyone saw the story. Your soulmate wasn't presenting themselves as someone who had handled everything perfectly. They openly admitted they had made a mistake. They had mistaken silence for kindness and fear for patience. And now they wanted to take responsibility for that. One person asked, "What if they tell you they waited for you?" Your soulmate's face changed immediately. That possibility seemed almost harder for them to hear than rejection, because it would mean both of you may have spent valuable time wondering about the same connection while neither knew the full truth. Your soulmate answered softly, "Then I'll tell them I'm sorry I made them question something I already knew inside myself." But another person asked an even more difficult question. "And what if they tell you they stopped waiting?" This time, your soulmate didn't look away. Their answer revealed just how much this confession had changed them. They said they would accept your truth, even if it wasn't the truth they hoped to hear. Love, they explained, couldn't mean controlling your decisions simply because they had finally found the courage to speak. But then they revealed something else. Before approaching you, they planned to return to the place connected with that reminder they had kept, the place where they first realized their feelings for you were becoming impossible to dismiss. They believed going there would help them remember exactly what they wanted to say without hiding behind rehearsed words. Something huge is waiting for you, because when your soulmate mentioned that place, the person who knew something about your feelings suddenly froze. They asked your soulmate to repeat where they were going. The moment they heard the answer, they whispered, "You don't understand." They were there recently. Your soulmate stared at them in disbelief. Then came the detail that changed everything. Apparently, you hadn't gone there by accident, and someone knew exactly why you had returned. Your soulmate couldn't hide the shock on their face. Of all the places you could have visited, you had returned to the one location carrying a memory neither of you had openly discussed. They immediately asked why you had gone there, but once again, the person refused to speak for you. They offered only one clue: you had stayed there longer than someone visiting casually would have stayed. You had looked around as though you were remembering something, and before leaving, you had apparently asked whether your soulmate ever came back there. That single detail changed everything. Your soulmate had spent so long believing they were alone in carrying those memories, yet now there was a possibility that you had been carrying them too. Their public confession suddenly felt less like a desperate risk and more like two unfinished stories quietly moving toward the same place. But your soulmate still didn't know what answer might be waiting there. Instead of becoming overconfident, they grew even more nervous. Your question about them could mean many things, and they refused to turn one clue into a promise you hadn't made. Still, something inside them shifted. They decided they wouldn't rehearse a perfect speech anymore. When they finally stood before you, they wanted their words to be simple and completely honest. They would tell you that the distance never erased what they felt. They would apologize for deciding that silence was somehow better for you. And then they would tell you the sentence they had been too afraid to say publicly, the sentence beneath everything else: I didn't stay away because I stopped choosing you. I stayed away because I was afraid I had already lost the right to choose you. Even the people who had heard the earlier confession became silent after that. Yet your soulmate wasn't finished. There was one final truth they intended to place entirely in your hands. They said they wouldn't ask you for an immediate answer. Instead, they would ask one question: is there still something here worth discovering together? No pressure. No promises forced out of emotion. Just one honest opening between two people who had spent too much time wondering. Then your soulmate finally left the room where the public confession had begun, carrying that old reminder with them. But before they could reach the place connected to your shared memory, their phone suddenly lit up. They stopped walking. Your name was on the screen. For several seconds, they simply stared at it, unable to understand how the timing could be real. Remember, they had never sent the message. They hadn't told you about the public confession. As far as they knew, you had no reason to contact them at that exact moment. Then they opened what you had sent, and the first few words made them realize that somehow, while they had been preparing to find you, you had been preparing to tell them something too. The message wasn't long, but your soulmate read it 3 times before taking another step. You hadn't confessed everything. You hadn't even mentioned love. Instead, you had written something far more unexpected: I don't know why, but I feel like we left an important conversation unfinished. Those words struck directly at everything your soulmate had just admitted in public. How could you possibly know that today, of all days, they had finally stopped hiding? Their first instinct was to respond immediately, but they stopped themselves. They didn't want another important moment between you reduced to carefully typed sentences. So they replied with only one question: can I see you? Then came the longest few minutes they could remember. The phone stayed silent. Your soulmate began wondering whether they had moved too quickly, until your answer finally appeared, and the location you suggested made their heart race. You asked to meet at the exact place your soulmate was already planning to visit. For a moment, they genuinely wondered whether someone had told you about the public confession. They called the person who knew about your recent visit and asked directly, but the answer was no. Nobody had contacted you. Nobody had arranged this. Somehow, both of you had independently chosen the same place while carrying the same unfinished conversation. Your soulmate looked down at the reminder they had kept and suddenly understood why this meeting felt different from every imagined version in their head. They weren't chasing you anymore. You were moving toward them too. Still, one uncertainty remained. Why now? What had happened in your life that made you finally reach out on the same day they confessed their feelings in front of everyone? Your soulmate was about to discover that the timing wasn't nearly as random as it appeared. When they arrived, you weren't there yet. Your soulmate stood quietly, remembering the moment when this place first became important, rehearsing nothing and feeling everything. Then they saw you approaching. Every confident sentence they had spoken publicly suddenly seemed easier than saying one honest word to your face. You stopped a short distance away, and for a few seconds, neither of you spoke. Finally, your soulmate said, "There's something you need to know about today." But before they could explain the confession, you interrupted with words they never expected. Before you say anything, I need to tell you why I came back here. Your soulmate froze. You looked toward the place connected to that old memory and revealed that something had happened during your previous visit, something that made you question whether the silence between you had ever meant what you thought it meant. And when you began explaining exactly what you discovered there, your soulmate realized their public confession might not have been the biggest revelation of the day after all. You told your soulmate that during your previous visit, someone had recognized you. At first, the conversation seemed ordinary, until that person casually mentioned seeing your soulmate there months earlier. They remembered them because your soulmate had stood in almost the same spot for a long time, holding something in their hand and looking as though they were waiting for courage to arrive. Then came the detail that stayed with you. Apparently, your soulmate had asked one quiet question before leaving, whether anyone had seen you there recently. Hearing that changed the meaning of the distance between you. You had believed their silence meant they were forgetting. Yet while you were wondering whether you still mattered, they had been returning to a place filled with memories of you and wondering the same thing. Your soulmate listened without interrupting, stunned that a private moment they thought nobody noticed had somehow found its way back to you. Then you asked the question they had feared most: why didn't you just come to me? Your soulmate could have offered 100 explanations, but standing in front of you made excuses feel useless. So they told you everything. They explained how they convinced themselves that stepping away would protect you from uncertainty. They admitted they were wrong to make that decision alone. And then, with their voice noticeably quieter, they revealed what had happened earlier that day. They told you about the public conversation. About being questioned. About finally saying in front of everyone that meeting other people couldn't erase what they felt for you. You stared at them, trying to understand. Then you asked, "You actually said that about me, in front of everyone?" Your soulmate nodded. But don't skip, because they hadn't yet repeated the most important sentence from that confession, and now there was no crowd to hide behind. Your soulmate looked directly at you and said, "I told them I don't want to spend my life wondering what would have happened if I had been brave enough to tell you the truth." The words landed differently here. No audience. No friends. Just you and the person who had carried those feelings through months of silence. Then they reached into their pocket and showed you the reminder they had refused to throw away. Your expression changed instantly. You recognized it. More importantly, you remembered the moment attached to it. Your soulmate explained why they had kept it and repeated the thought that always stopped them from letting it go: maybe one day they would get the chance to tell you what that memory meant. For several seconds, you said nothing. Your soulmate prepared themselves for whatever came next. But instead of answering their confession, you reached for something you had brought with you. And the moment your soulmate saw what was in your hand, they realized they weren't the only one who had kept a piece of your shared past. Your soulmate stared at what you were holding and immediately recognized it. It was another small reminder from the same chapter of your lives, the kind of thing nobody else would understand, but something the two of you could never mistake. Suddenly, all those months of uncertainty felt different. You admitted that you had nearly thrown it away more than once. Each time, you stopped for the same reason your soulmate had. Something inside you refused to believe the story had truly finished. But you hadn't kept it because you were waiting helplessly. You kept it because that memory represented a moment when their feelings had seemed genuine, before silence made you question everything. Then you looked directly at your soulmate and said, I needed to know whether that person was real. Or whether I imagined what was between us. Your soulmate's eyes changed, because now they understood exactly what their disappearance had made you doubt. They didn't rush to defend themselves. Instead, your soulmate admitted something painful. The person you remembered had always been real, but fear had made them behave like someone else. They thought withholding their feelings would prevent complications. Instead, it created the very confusion they wanted to avoid. Then you asked whether the public confession happened only because they heard someone new might be entering your life. Your soulmate answered carefully. The news had frightened them, yes, but it hadn't created their feelings. It had simply removed the excuse that there would always be another day to speak. I was already in love with you, they said. I just finally understood that silence could make me lose the chance to tell you. Those were the words everyone else had been waiting to hear earlier. But standing in front of you, your soulmate added something they hadn't said publicly, something much more vulnerable. They told you they weren't asking you to forget the distance or immediately trust every promise. They wanted to earn whatever came next through consistency, honesty, and time. Then your soulmate finally asked the question they had prepared, is there still something here worth discovering together? You looked away for a moment, holding that old reminder in your hand. The silence felt endless. Your soulmate didn't interrupt it. They had promised themselves that this time, you would have the freedom they once denied you when they decided alone that distance was best. Finally, you looked back at them and said there was something they needed to know before you could answer. Your soulmate's expression tightened. You explained that the possibility of another person entering your life wasn't completely invented, but everyone had misunderstood what was actually happening. Someone had approached you recently with serious intentions, and you had already given that person an answer. Your soulmate swallowed hard and asked the only question that mattered, what did you tell them? You took a breath, stepped slightly closer, and revealed that your answer had everything to do with the person standing in front of you. You told your soulmate that when this other person approached you, you couldn't pretend your heart was completely available. You had tried to be fair. You had asked yourself whether holding on to an unfinished connection made any sense after so much silence. But when the moment came to give an answer, one truth became impossible to ignore. Beginning something new while still carrying unanswered feelings for your soulmate would have been unfair to everyone involved. So you said no. Not because you had been promised anything by your soulmate. Not because you knew they would return. You said no because you needed clarity about what had happened between the two of you before pretending it no longer mattered. Your soulmate stood completely still. The possibility they had feared all day had already come. And your heart had made a choice before you even knew about their public confession. But you immediately made something clear. Turning someone else down did not automatically mean your soulmate could walk back into your life as though nothing had happened. You needed answers. You needed to know whether this new courage would survive after the emotional intensity of today disappeared. Your soulmate nodded and said that was fair. Then you asked the question that mattered most. If nobody had pushed you today, would you still have told me? That question landed harder than anything said publicly. Your soulmate hesitated, and you noticed. But instead of giving you the perfect answer, they gave you an honest one. I want to say yes, they admitted, but I don't know how much longer fear would have controlled me. Then they stepped closer and added, that's why I'm done making promises about someday. I can only show you what I choose from this moment forward. Something about that answer softened your expression, but you still had one more thing to reveal. You told your soulmate there was another reason you had contacted them today. Earlier, before sending that message, you had heard something unexpected. Not the entire public confession, but enough to know their name and yours had been mentioned together. Someone who witnessed part of the conversation had reached out to you without revealing exactly what was said. They simply told you, if there's anything unfinished between you two, today might be the day to stop avoiding it. Your soulmate's face changed. Suddenly, the timing made sense, but another mystery appeared. They asked who had contacted you, because only a handful of people had been close enough to hear everything. When you revealed the person's identity, your soulmate looked genuinely stunned. It was the last person they expected to encourage this meeting. The same person who had once told them that letting you go might be the smartest choice. And now your soulmate needed to know what had changed their mind. Your soulmate couldn't understand why that particular person had helped bring you together. For months, they had been the strongest voice telling your soulmate to accept the distance and move forward. Yet after witnessing the public confession, something apparently changed. You explained that when they contacted you, they didn't defend your soulmate or try to convince you to give them another chance. They simply admitted they had misjudged what was happening. They had assumed your soulmate was holding on to an idealized memory, but hearing them take responsibility for their silence changed that impression. More importantly, they had watched your soulmate refuse to blame you for anything. That was when they realized these feelings weren't about possession or winning. Your soulmate was finally willing to risk rejection just to give you the truth. But before ending the conversation with you, that person had said one sentence you hadn't been able to forget: there is something they said about you that you deserve to hear directly from them. You looked at your soulmate and asked what those words meant. Suddenly, they seemed nervous again. They had told you about the public confession, but not every part of it. One sentence had been too personal to repeat immediately. You waited without pushing. Finally, your soulmate said, "Someone asked me what I would do if you never chose me." Your expression changed, but they continued. In front of everyone, your soulmate had answered that loving you did not give them ownership over your future. If your happiness eventually led somewhere else, they would respect it, even though it would hurt. Then they added the part they had been afraid to tell you: but if there's even a small chance your heart still recognizes mine, I want to spend my time proving that I can be someone who doesn't disappear when things become difficult. You didn't answer immediately. The confession wasn't a demand for a perfect ending. It was an offer to show up differently. And that made your next words even more important. You stepped closer and told your soulmate that your heart had never needed a dramatic speech. What you had needed was honesty, consistency, the courage to stay present after the emotional moment passed. Then, for the first time, you answered the question they had asked earlier: was there still something between you worth discovering? Yes, you said quietly, but I don't want us to return to what we were. If we do this, we start differently. Your soulmate's relief was immediate, but you raised your hand before they could respond. There was one condition. You weren't asking for promises about forever. You wanted one promise about tomorrow, no disappearing when fear returned. Your soulmate agreed without hesitation. But just as the tension between you finally began to soften, their phone vibrated. A message had arrived from someone who witnessed the original public confession. Your soulmate opened it, expecting congratulations. Instead, their expression changed completely. The message said that after your soulmate left, someone else had stood up in front of everyone, and revealed they knew something about why the two of you had been kept apart for so long. Your soulmate read the message again, then showed it to you. Neither of you understood what "kept apart" was supposed to mean. Until now, the distance had seemed like the result of fear, bad timing, and choices neither of you communicated properly. But apparently, after your soulmate left, someone in the room admitted they had known more than they ever revealed. Your soulmate immediately called the person who sent the message. The answer came quickly. Nobody was claiming there had been some elaborate plan against you. The truth was quieter, and somehow more painful. Months earlier, when your soulmate was uncertain about approaching you, this person had repeatedly told them that you seemed happier without them. At the same time, whenever your name came up around people who knew you, they allowed the impression to spread that your soulmate had already moved on. Two people who were both afraid of rejection had been hearing exactly what their fears wanted them to believe. Your soulmate lowered the phone and looked at you. Suddenly, several confusing moments made sense. You remembered hearing that they were doing perfectly fine without you, so you stopped asking questions because you didn't want to interfere. Your soulmate remembered being told you would close that chapter, so they treated every urge to contact you as something selfish they needed to suppress. Neither of you had been directly lied to about a specific fact. Instead, assumptions had been made to manipulate something. Your soulmate looked genuinely shaken. I should have asked you, they said. You answered that you should have asked too. And that was the painful lesson sitting between you. Both of you had trusted secondary impressions more than the conversation you were afraid to have. But then the caller revealed why the person had finally admitted this vulnerability. During your soulmate's confession, they realized their advice had helped reinforce the silence. They wanted to correct the last misunderstanding before it caused any more damage. Their response at the time had been, "Leave them alone. They've moved on." Now they confessed they had never actually moved on. They had simply assumed the ways to be against you. Your soulmate closed the doors for a moment, realizing how close they had come to speaking to you months ago. But instead of becoming angry, they looked at you and said, "This is exactly why I don't want anyone speaking to you." You agreed. From now on, questions will go directly to each other. No guessing. No parlor. No disagreement behind arguments or arguments. Then your soulmates phone buzzed again. A second message appeared. This one containing a screenshot from that old conversation. And when you saw the date at the top, your expression changed, because you remembered exactly what you had been doing and saying.